Thank you for tuning in for Pet Week on Capitol Hill. I'm Chloe DeVita, your Pet Week host. For those of you joining for the first time, Pet Week on Capitol Hill is a series of virtual programming about the importance of pet ownership in America. Throughout the week, we'll learn all about new research and data, impactful programs, and pet-friendly policies that strengthen the human-animal bond and improve well-being for pets and the people that love and care for them. Pet Week is hosted by the Human Animal Bond Research Institute, HABRI, a nonprofit research and education organization that works to advance the vital role of the human-animal bond in the health and well-being of people, pets, cultures, and communities. I'd like to take a moment and thank all of our Pet Week on Capitol Hill sponsors who make this programming possible. Special thanks to this session's sponsor, Michaelson Found Animals, MFA. Dr. Gary Michaelson started Found Animals in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina by establishing the first free microchip registry for pets. The goal was to allow every lost animal to find their way home. In the 15 years since, MFA has continued to identify important problems facing pets and people and develop real-world, scalable solutions to help them thrive. Their programs now span social enterprises, impact investments, and thought leadership initiatives that champion pets at every point they intersect with our society. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our session speakers, Nia Bratton, Ross Barker, and Jen Naitaki. Nia Bratton serves as the policy manager at Michaelson Philanthropies, where she leads a diverse portfolio of initiatives designed to drive meaningful systems change. Working extensively through the Michaelson Center for Public Policy, she develops and executes legislative and advocacy strategies across city, county, state, and federal levels to remove barriers, expand opportunities, and advance practical, equitable solutions. Ross Barker is the program director for the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative at Michaelson Found Animals Foundation. Ross and his team use research to inform programs that build bridges between the pet and housing communities and promote the development of pet inclusive housing opportunities across the United States. A research professional for more than 20 years, Ross has worked in the pet care area for the past decade. Jen Naitaki is the managing director of Michaelson Found Animals. In this role, she oversees a range of initiatives, impact grants and programs that put resources in the hands of historically marginalized communities, research and tools that promote pet-inclusive rental housing policies, and efforts to expand access to spay and neuter services in Los Angeles and across California. Thank you all for being here to talk about pet-inclusive housing, and welcome to the screen.
Hey everyone, we're so happy to be here.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi everyone. We're fortunate today to be able to speak to you on the intersection of pets and housing and share more about our work through the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, a longstanding collaboration with our friends at HABRI. MFA, which is really short for Michaelson Found Animals, I won't say that every single time, was founded in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina to really keep people and pets together. Since then, our focus has been pretty simple: to ensure that everyone has access to the joy of pets, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And we do this through scalable, sustainable solutions, tackling complex challenges at the intersection of human and animal well-being, and really driving solutions that make a lasting difference and are made to last a lifetime. MFA is part of Michaelson Philanthropies, a network of foundations and initiatives founded by Dr. Gary K. Michaelson and co-chaired with Alia Michaelson. Together, the philanthropies advance education, medical research, animal welfare, public policy, all in service of Dr. Michelson's vision of making life less unfair. Now that I've shared a bit about the foundations, I'll pass it over to my colleague Ross Barker to get us started.
Thanks, Jen. So to help orient us to the challenge we're facing, I'm going to share some data with you. First, I just want to emphasize what most of you probably already know. A lot of people own pets. In the US, according to the American Pet Products Association's most recent data, 71% of households in the US own a pet, which is up a bit from last year's number. But to illustrate what's happening when renters among that 71% with pets are looking for housing, we're going to start with this term pet-friendly. We hear the term quite often, but it's not well defined, and it's used in a variety of ways. So depending on who you're talking to, you may get a different meaning or thought behind this. This disconnect in the definition helps us understand why we have a pets and housing problem. So our research shows that 76% of owners and operators of rental housing consider themselves pet friendly. But if you factor in things like cats being accepted but not dogs, dogs being accepted but not cats, breed restrictions, size restrictions, limitations on the number of pets, non-refundable fees, monthly pet rents, no pet amenities, and generally a non-welcoming environment for pets, then it's not a surprise that 72% of renters say that finding pet-friendly housing is hard to find. So it's this pet owners having a hard time finding housing that rental housing providers say is there. And then in the end, only about 8% of rental housing properties are free of all these restrictions. So with that in mind, we spent a good deal of time as a team talking about what this disconnect is and why it's there. And we're attempting to kind of clean up the conversation around pet friendliness. So what we're going to explore here is the difference between pet inclusive, what we're calling pet inclusive, and pet friendly. It's really a very different term. It's not a synonym. It's not just meant to be a substitute for pet friendly, but it's something fundamentally different. And so what you can see here is that when we're talking about something that's pet friendly, it's just generally meaning that the property allows pets in some form without regard to other kinds of restrictions or fees that might be in place. But when we move to pet inclusive, we're talking about properties that have no breed restrictions, no size restrictions, no non-benefit fees. And I'll talk about that in a second. And they have some basic pet amenities. And so let me talk about those last two a bit. So when we talk about non-benefit fees, we're talking about fees that are charged, but that don't produce or demonstrate any particular benefit, tangible benefit to the pet and the pet owner. So for example, having a lot of waste stations could be a really big benefit for pet owners. Having a dog park where the bark dust is replenished every 6 months could be a real benefit. So if those things are called out, then it makes more sense. But often there's no real benefits attached to the fees that are being charged. When we talk about basic pet amenities, those two that I just mentioned really are the most basic and the most important amenities. So just having sufficient number of waste stations around so that it can keep the community clean, that's really important. And also having just a place for exercise and relief. It doesn't need to be a fancy dog park with agility equipment and the latest technology. It just needs to be a place where people can take their dogs for exercise and relief. Other features and amenities like grooming stations, those are great, but they aren't the things that make the biggest difference for most people trying to find a place to rent with their pets. So looking to the right of this, what we see is it's a journey, right? We recognize that all these things are not supposed to happen overnight. We're not going to remove all the breed restrictions and the size restrictions, but it's really a journey. And so when we talk to housing providers, we're talking to them about how do you start this journey? What are the things you can change today and make a start? Because in the end, pet friendly is okay, but it's really only a start to what we're trying to do. So I want to talk about how this plays out in real places. So when we look at the properties that allow pets, going back to that pet-friendly term, there is definitely room for improvement. But in markets across the country, when we consider that about 70% of households own pets, situation generally seems pretty good for people with pets because most places we see across the U.S. are about 3/4 allowing pets. There's some exceptions. You see California here being lower, but that's kind of countered by Texas being over 90%. So it's a pretty good chunk of those rental properties that allow pets. But if we remember our definition of pet inclusive, we start to see a different story when we look at it through that lens. The numbers drop dramatically. So that blue bar that was pet friendly, over 70% in most cases, that means the majority of rental housing doesn't have or does allow pets. But the orange bar that we show here shows the ones that are pet inclusive, meaning they allow, we do not have any of those restrictions that we're talking about, particularly the breed and size restrictions. So this is very common. You see the numbers being very similar across these different markets and nationally. No state has more than 9% of the units meeting this, the basic idea of pet inclusiveness, meaning no breed, no size restrictions. So we talk about the pet friendly and the pet friendly pet inclusive gap, or the PF-PI gap. This is what we're referring to, this gap between the top of the blue pet friendly bar and the shorter orange pet inclusive bar. So what's standing in the way? when we look at the biggest barriers to pet inclusive housing, four themes consistently rise to the top. Addressing these would open doors for millions of families with pets while giving housing providers clearer, more equitable policies. The first of these is breed and weight restrictions. These rules exclude millions of families, even though research shows no connection between a dog's size or breed and higher risk. We believe the better approach is behavior-based screening that looks at the individual pet and owner, not at stereotypes. Second, the cost burden of high deposits and monthly pet rents puts housing out of reach for many families, especially those with lower incomes. Our research shows that these fees don't reflect actual damages incurred by property owners or the level of amenities being provided. And they often force families into tough choices about whether they can keep their pets. A third barrier is vague lease language. When policies are unclear, for example, saying pets are allowed only at a landlord's discretion, renters are left uncertain about their rights and risk eviction. Standardized and transparent policies benefit both renters and housing providers by building clarity and trust. And finally, insurance exclusions. So breed-based restrictions ripple through the housing industry, and many property owners say their breed and weight restrictions are required by their insurance policies. But often this isn't the case, and it really just requires a closer look at that actual policy. However, when insurance companies and providers do impose these outdated breed-based restrictions, housing providers have the option to look for alternatives. And that's what we talked to them about. Where can you, if you can explore whether you have these restrictions, and if you do, what options do you have? And they are out there. Breed restrictive policies don't reflect actual risk, and they force housing providers to pass those restrictions on to renters. Our PIHI team is working with both housing and insurance providers to better understand this barrier and to come up with more equitable approaches to keeping a property safe. Taken together, these barriers don't exist just on paper. They have real consequences. 1 in 3 renters has given up a pet due to housing restrictions, with the steepest burdens falling on low-income renters and communities of color. However, these barriers are also opportunities. By modernizing outdated insurance rules, reducing excessive fees, and clarifying lease language, we can prevent unnecessary surrenders, keep families together, and create a more equitable housing system. In doing so, we not only expand access for renters, but also reduce burdens for housing providers and strengthen communities. So it's a win for everyone involved. So it's important to remember that this is not just a pet issue, it's equally a human issue. When renters are forced to give up their pets, it impacts their families, their stability, and their mental health. We know 1 in 3 renters has surrendered a pet due to housing restrictions, and the burden is especially heavy on low-income renters and communities of color. So when we talk about pet-inclusive housing, we're really talking about housing equity, stability, and well-being. So how to respond to these barriers? At PIHI, our philosophy is simple: open the door. That means expanding access by rethinking outdated policies, creating clear and fair lease practices, and removing unnecessary financial and insurance obstacles. Opening door benefits pets, not just pets only, but the people and communities who love them. So the first step in our approach is education. I'm going to outline a couple steps here. I'm going to talk about the first one and hand it over to Nia for the second one, but we start with education. Many housing providers and policymakers want to be more pet inclusive, but aren't sure how to do it in practice. So PIHI develops data, tools, and resources to bridge that gap, making it easier to understand the real risks and benefits and giving operators and policymakers practical ways to implement fair, more inclusive housing policies. And now I'm going to turn over to Nia to cover the second part.
Yes, thank you so much, Ross. As Ross shared, education is critical, but education alone isn't enough. At MCPP, we've learned that real lasting change happens when education and legislation work hand in hand. With education, we raise awareness and we build understanding, but without that policy, those same systemic barriers remain in place. And on the flip side, policy without education often fails in implementation. Because without stakeholder buy-in, change never reaches the people it's meant to help. So with our approach, we love to integrate both. We educate while we legislate, ensuring that stakeholders, housing providers, and decision makers understand why change is needed and how to make it work in practice. When implementation reveals gaps, programs stall, access breaks down, or systems fail renters, we leverage policy to close those gaps and strengthen the framework. We protect our programmatic initiatives through policy, giving our investments the structural support they need to succeed. And when we find what's working, policy allows us to scale it. We can turn local success into a model that can expand across cities, counties, states, and it can be even used federally. Policy is how we lock in our progress. It transforms innovative ideas into lasting systems. Our role is to take what we learn from the field, from renters, owner-operators, community partners, and turn those lessons into actionable policies that drive meaningful change and sustainable impact. And now I'm going to show a little bit of what we've been working on, a little bit of our policy in practice. So this is some of the stuff we've been working on for the past year and a half. Definitely not all encompassing and more to come, but these are some of our top levels. So with this, we really work on bringing cross-sector partners and leaders from both sides of the aisle to craft innovative, balanced policies that deliver real wins for renters, housing providers, and entire communities. I would say our real strength at MCPP is convening diverse voices and building coalitions that turn shared challenges into shared solutions. Because every community starts from a different place. Success looks different as well. In some areas, we've really driven transformative change, really getting rid of major barriers. And in others, progress we've learned is incremental, step by step. But those incremental wins build momentum and again, open the door to larger reforms. A core part of our work, I would say, as a 501c4 social welfare organization is we really want to empower communities. We equip them with tools, strategies, and support that they need to advocate for themselves, ensuring that change will last beyond the legislation that we create. Look, with all of this, we can see that progress is happening, fueled by data, community insight, and collaboration. We design solutions that make an immediate difference. As you can see, from expanding access in DC to removing restrictions in Evanston and driving innovation in our own backyard in Los Angeles County, our work shows what's possible when we listen, convene, and act. And we're just getting started. Our focus remains really on breaking down barriers and accelerating meaningful change with a focus on impact now. Now I'm going to pass it over, or back, I'd say, to Jen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nia. I'm so fortunate to work with such bright, amazing people. So just a couple of notes to close us out on why does this matter? Pet inclusive housing really is bigger than just the pets, as you've heard Nia and Ross talk about. It shapes whether families can stay stable, whether communities are healthy, even how our own shelters operate in our communities. And it ties directly to equity and opportunity. What we're trying to do is honestly pretty simple. Create a roadmap that communities can actually use, bring in policy tools that reflects how families live today, and champion strategies that are both practical and scalable for pet owners and housing providers alike. I'll end with just this final message that at the end of the day, this is about building housing that reflects real families, nearly 2/3 of families, in fact. And that means making room for pets, investing in our communities, and keeping people and pets together. Just want to thank my colleagues in Habry for having us here. And on the next slide, we'll also be sharing our contact information for you to get in touch with us for any questions. It's going to take all of us to get this done, and we are really appreciative of the support. Thank you.
Wow, that was so great to hear about everything that MFA is doing and your unique approaches to advancing pet inclusive housing through data, education, policy, everything so important. So Ross, looking ahead, what are your hopes for the nearest future, say 3 to 5 years from now, as it relates to expanding pet inclusive housing in the US?
So I would like to think that in 5 years we don't need this program because things are happening in that way. I think realistically, we know that this is a long journey, and we would have hoped that we would have made more progress on big properties sooner than we have. And so I know that's a long journey. And we're also learning a lot as we go along that these things can't all happen at once, right? And it's got to be a combination of talking to housing providers and renters about their needs, right? And balancing those needs. And that conversation takes longer. We're not going to get there just by imposing legislation or getting one fell swoop where we get all the properties to suddenly change all their policies. It's going to be a conversation. It's going to take time. So I think what I would like to see about it in 5 years is that we have really cut that gap. So if you think about a gap nationally that's 75% that are pet friendly and say call it 6% that are, that don't breed in size ships, I would love to see that gap at least cut in half. If we could get that to be, where that pet inclusive number is 40%, that would be huge. It would be a tremendous win. And that's where I would like to see it go. And if we could just start by cutting that gap in half, that would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that gap cut in half because I think it was surprising to see the gap, how big that gap is, and how
Right.
much work there is to do. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited that Michaelson Found Animals is
Yeah.
taking that on. And speaking of closing that gap, Nia, when we talk about members of Congress who are here, right? It's Pet Week on Capitol Hill. We are here discussing legislation and policy. What is it that you would like them to know about this issue of pet inclusive housing?
Yeah, I would really love them to know that this is not just a pet issue. This is a human issue, and that your constituents face this issue every day, and that there is something that they can do. There are solutions on every side, whether it's just making sure that fees are transparent or getting rid of restrictions that allow people to not be in housing. We will find that solution, and we're here and we're ready to work with you.
Mm, yeah. Jen,
That
do you have more? Yeah. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's great. Just one closing thought is that, most Americans love pets and have pets and love pets. And, this is really an issue that spans across party lines even, right? And so to really think about not just pets and housing, but also in any other legislation that is coming up, like how can we actually integrate and talk about pets and find solutions, not just in housing, but in other areas too.
Yeah, across the US, I really, really love all of that. And thinking of that, Ross, for those who are watching, and that is across members of Congress, people interested in Pet Week on Capitol Hill, just pet lovers in general, how can those who are interested in everything they learned, Michaelson Philanthropies, and all that you're all doing, where can they learn more? How can they learn more?
Sure. I'll start with the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative and the resources that we have available and ways to get in touch with us. So we have our website, which is petsandhousing.org. Pretty easy to find. And on that website, we have our resources broken into multiple sections, one for policymakers, one specifically dedicated to policymakers and talking points and potential language to use as they're thinking about their own legislation. We have a section for housing providers, for animal welfare organizations, and for renters, right? So it's really trying to give these resources to people in a way that is meaningful to them. We're always evolving them and updating them and making sure that they are timely. So that's the best place to learn about us. I think I'd also suggest signing up for our newsletter, which can be done on our website. We send that out regularly, monthly, to just keep people up to date on what we're working on and news stories that we're finding that are relevant to the topic. And the last thing I'd say is follow us on LinkedIn because that's a Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, because that's a way to get the most recent data that we're publishing. Sometimes it's a little data bite that we come across that's interesting and helpful. So that's where we're putting out the most timely info. So I would say those things. And I don't know, Jen, you want to speak more broadly about the Michaelson organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in addition to just the work that we do on pets and housing, we're also looking at and run a lot of programming that's addressing some of the root causes of why animals end up in shelters. So, that's everything from access to veterinary care to spay and neuter and other programs. So, there's really a wealth of knowledge on foundanimals.org. We're also kind of data nerds. And so I know that you saw that briefly with Ross's slides, but we've got a lot of really helpful data too. So if there's anything that folks are ever looking for or a point that they're trying to prove, please reach out to us because it's more than likely that we have that data available.
Mhm. I loved all the data being a fellow data nerd. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, facts. So that was excellent to read. And as we were wrapping up here, Nia, let's kick it to you for what else you would like to just share with everyone today. You guys went over many, many, many different things and touched on many things, such important things. So what kind of final thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I think really we know that the issues around pet inclusive housing are complex and they vary from to community. And so our goal is not really we just want to advocate for change, but we also want to listen, learn, and work alongside everyone to address these barriers. We're here, we're ready to provide that technical assistance and be able to build out programming and policies that work for you in your specific area. And we just want to make sure that we are supporting stronger, healthier communities and really noting too how all of these issues that we face as humans all intersect. And so we just need to make sure that we are plucking away and trying to solve as best as possible and making sure that we keep it balanced and we keep it practical as well.
Hmm, wise words. Ross, anything to add?
I just want to underscore what Nia was talking about, that it made me think of collaboration and kind of working across different groups and with different groups, and trying to be someone who provides resources for all of them. And, I really encourage people when they go look at our resources, if they find something that's useful as it is, great, use it. If you're seeing something that's missing, let us know. We'd love to develop, we're always developing those new resources to make them timely and relevant. Or if you see something that, like, this is good, but I'd love to modify it a little bit, tweak it a little bit to make it perfect for us, we can also do that. I mean, so we're really trying to be in service to all of the groups that we work with and stakeholder groups, because everybody's got a role in this. And so we want to make sure that the conversation happens with the best information possible.
Mm.
Yeah.
Amazing. Any final thoughts, Jen?
Just that pets, it's a win-win for everyone, and there are very few things that are. And so the more folks that hop onto this bandwagon, I think the better.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Jen, Nia, and Ross, for your time today and your dedication to creating the research, resources, and tools to keep people and pets together in housing, no matter where they live.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you again to Michaelson Found Animals for being our session sponsor. Pet Week is made possible through the generosity of our sponsors, who are dedicated to sharing information about the importance of pets and the human-animal bond for people, communities, and pets across America. Please join us for more sessions this week by visiting petnight.com or Hebry's Facebook page. On behalf of Hebry and all of our sponsors and all of you, thank you for joining us today in this important conversation, and we hope to see you again.